Welcome to this special edition of the VIP show. In this episode, I will be interviewing one of the greatest politicians in British history. He's a strong critic of Western imperialism and Zionism, and is a strong supporter of the Palestinian cause and justice in the Middle East and right around the world. The VIP is George Galloway.
I go every month to Beirut and I make two shows.
Yes,
Mr. Ghassan's interviews, we call them the talk show.
Oh, okay. George Galloway is the MP for Bradford West. He helped set up the Respect Party in 2004 after he was expelled from the Labour Party for his strong anti-war stance. Assalamu alaikum, George Galloway.
Alaikum salam.
Many thanks for joining us to the VIP show. My first question is, we want to know about your childhood.
Well, I come from the northeast Scottish city of Dundee, which lies roughly between Edinburgh and Aberdeen. It's an industrial working class city. When I was born there, it was all white. There were no foreigners there at all. I was born into an Irish immigrant part of town known as Tipperary, after the Irish town of Tipperary. It was an Irish enclave in a Scottish city. I learned a thing or two about discrimination over my life and about the role of the British Empire. I once came home and told my Irish grandfather that the teacher had said that Britain had an empire so huge that the sun upon it never set. And my grandfather answered, that's because God would never trust the British in the dark. And I had no cause to doubt him then or since. My mother was a school cleaner, my father an industrial worker in a factory, and I grew up in a very political household, a very anti-imperialist household, which explains much of my political life's work since.
At the age of 13, you joined the Labour Party. Yeah. It was a very young age. What motivated you to join the Labour Party, and why did you decide to get involved in politics?
Well, my parents were members and were highly political people. So from much earlier than 13, I was working in elections for Labour, handing out leaflets at the gates and on election day and so on. Our house used to be darkened by Labour campaign posters for the duration of every election campaign. It was natural for me to graduate into left-wing politics, although my parents weren't as left-wing as me. They were mainstream Labour people. They thought that Harold Wilson and James Callaghan and people like those were the acme of political correctness. So it was a normal thing for me to graduate into the Labour Party, and I always knew that I'd follow a political life. I didn't know that I'd be 26 years an MP. I didn't know that I'd have the initials MP after my name, but I always knew that I'd be spending my life in politics.
What did you hope to achieve while you were, in the political process? What was some of the issues that you really felt strongly about?
Well, in the first instance, in defense of working people in my own country, and that's my first duty. The people who have nothing to sell except their work, who if they didn't work would have no wages, no salary, and would not be able to live. They have no property, no stocks and shares, no big bank accounts. So my defense of ordinary working people in my own country was my first love. But because of my background and because of the times in which I grew up, the decolonization of the world, which has since been recolonized, a hatred of imperialism, of the overbearing domination by rich countries of poor countries, by Western countries of Eastern countries, and ultimately by the non-Muslim countries of the Muslim lands when it was discovered the great bounty which God had given them in terms of oil and gas resources and the sovereign wealth funds which come from them. But my involvement in the Arab world came about purely by chance. As I said, I had never met an Arab, I had never met a Muslim, and one came to the door one day of the Labour Party office. I was alone in the office. He was the leader of the Palestinian Students' Union, GUPS, at that time. He said he wanted to talk to the leaders of the party about Palestine. I told him there are no leaders here. I was 21 years old. There are no leaders here, but you can tell me and I'll pass it on. And at the end of a 2-hour mesmerizing talk by him about the Nakba, the catastrophe which had enveloped the Palestinian people, I was a signed-up member of the Palestinian resistance, which I remain to this day, by the grace of God.
You also mention that where you were growing up, and Scotland itself is obviously very different to England. They're very anti-imperialist.
Well, it's partly about the pattern of development. Capitalism develops unequally, and in this country, wealth is concentrated in some small parts of the country, where a lot of people live, and there are a lot of poor people also living there. But a place like Scotland, which was heavily dependent upon industry, on manufacturing, shipbuilding, steel, coal, the kind of things that men usually, and men and women also, do with their hands. This era passed us by, and therefore mass unemployment was the reality in Scotland when I was first politically active, and deindustrialization and hopelessness, and now supplanted by a hopelessness which is leavened by heavy dependence on alcohol and on drugs and so on. So there are a lot of social problems in places like Scotland, in the post-industrial desert that capitalism has left behind. And because Scotland was not as enthusiastically an empire builder, then there are more anti-imperialist people there. And also the 25% of Scotland is of Irish Catholic background, so we have a memory, folk memory of what happened to Ireland at the hands of imperialism. It's true that Scotland is a more anti-imperialist place. The task is to try and make Britain a less imperialist place, and that's not going so well.
Traditionally, the Labour Party was very much a party on the left, supporting the working class. But it moved, and it moved very drastically, and it became pretty much a right sort of centre party, and you know, any remnant of it being something which supports the working class, anti-imperialistic, etc., has almost diminished.
Well, Mr. Blair and his gang hijacked the Labour Party, and they flew it to destruction. They did so deliberately. They believed that there was no future for such a party, and that therefore they would change its name, change its character, and Labour became New Labour. That was its official title under Mr. Blair, which effectively became non-Labour, and now is anti-Labour. They stand for the very opposite of the things that the party was founded to stand for, and the people who used to be able to depend on them are now betrayed by them. And that's why when I was expelled over the Iraq War, I started a new party called Respect, Ihtaram in Arabic, which is the ghost of Labour's past, really. It stands for the people that Labour has abandoned. It says the things Labour used to say, and if it were in power, it would do the things that Labour used to want to do. And that's why they hate us so much, because we are their ghost. When they look at us, they can see themselves in the mirror. And that's why the conflict on the left in British politics between us and them is so very sharp. And the fact that, mashallah, I keep winning, keep defeating them in elections, is very difficult for them to bear. They would much rather be defeated by a Conservative than be defeated by me.
Is there then a future for the left in the political arena in Britain?
Well, if you look at issue by issue, the great majority of people support the left on privatization of public services. The great majority of people are opposed to it. On going to war after war, great majority of people are opposed to it. On fairness at work, on equality between men and women, people of different kinds. Most people, the vast majority of people, are with us. So issue by issue, we win these arguments. But we have a problem that if you call something left, if you call it socialist, you're erecting barriers between you and the people because of the kind of media we have, because of the history we have as the first capitalist country, the biggest imperialist country, It's not that easy to wave the flag and expect people to rally behind it. I had the great privilege of being present in a conversation between Fidel Castro and Hugo Chavez, God rest his soul. And in that conversation, Fidel asked Comandante Chavez to stop calling things socialist. Stop talking about socialism. Just do socialist things, and you'll see how popular they are.
Out of all the struggles around the world, what makes Palestine so important?
Well, that's a good question. There are times I ask myself this question. My involvement with the Arabs has not been entirely a good one, and has caused me a lot of damage and scars. Not because we confronted the Zionist enemy. That was easy. The problem is some of the Arabs. The Palestine issue is emblematic of many things. First of all, it's religiously significant. Secondly, it's significant as one of the most brazen examples of imperialist theft in history. I mean, in this building, this very building, Mr. Balfour, on behalf of one people, promised to a second people the land which belonged to a third people. Even by imperialist standards, that's pretty brazen. And the fact that Britain didn't even possess Palestine as a colonial possession at the time that it gave it away makes it even more obscene. So the fact that Britain has such a vital, pivotal part in this crime is one of the reasons why I've stuck to it so doggedly. It's important for anyone who loves liberty to see a people whose country has been wiped off the map. But it's got this additional religious significance for Christian people, for Muslim people, which makes it particularly special and holy and sacred. And largely it's also personal. If you become close to a people, as I did, to the Palestinian people and to the people of Iraq, this never leaves you. It enters your bloodstream. It inhabits your dreams. You fall in love with the people, the culture, the topography, the history, everything.
When you were trying to get people to know about Palestine, how was it at the very beginning when you first campaigned for Palestine, and how is it now? Have you seen a change?
That's a very good question, and one which isn't asked of me often enough. When I identified in 1975 with the PLO, with Chairman Arafat, it was the equivalent in terms of the shock value and how you were treated of declaring, for example, that you were with Al-Qaeda or bin Laden today. Of course, I've always been against Al-Qaeda and against bin Laden, but it had that same shock value. The PLO in 1975 had recently been involved in the widespread hijacking of airplanes, the Munich Olympic Games operation. The Palestine was a synonym for international terrorism, which was then quite a new phenomenon, at least in that form. So it was, I mean, I could show you my scars. It was horrific, the impact in the media treatment of it, the political class treatment of it, and so on. In a way, that drove me on because I was convinced that I was right, that the Palestinians were the victims, not the terrorists, and that their cause was great. And the more hatred that it engendered, the more abuse and threats and damage that one sustained, in a way, perversely, drove one on further. You'd made a choice, you'd made a stand, you had to stick to it. But if I had chosen the other side, as most of my fellows in the Labour Party had, if I had become, instead of a supporter of the PLO, a supporter of Israel, you might be talking to me in Downing Street today. It's as significant as that. In 1975, you could have fitted all the supporters of the PLO in this room in Parliament and in a not much bigger room in the country as a whole. And that began to change around 1982 with the Israeli invasion of Lebanon, the massacres of Sabra and Shatila and so on. That's when the tide turned. Now everybody knows that Palestine is the heart of the matter. that the injustice done to the Palestinians is the flaw at the heart of Western policy towards the East. Everybody knows that something has to be done, but we're still a long way short of turning that kinetically into actual change, forcing Israel to disgorge that which it has illicitly swallowed and destroyed.
Talk to us about some of your major achievements as a politician and as an activist.
Well, I suppose my major achievement in this context, given what I've just been saying, is that I've been elected 6 times to Parliament, always against the odds, in 4 different constituencies, 2 different countries, Scotland and England, and with most of the powerful people in the country trying constantly to destroy me. I think I've helped turn public opinion around on Palestine. The Palestinians paid the highest price for that. Through massacre and removal and so on. But I played a small part in it, I think. I was one of the main leaders of the anti-war movement against the war on Afghanistan and Iraq. Again, we became millions, and now everyone agrees with us. Everyone agrees that the invasion and occupation of these 2 countries has been a disaster and has had consequences which, for the people who did it, they now claim were unforeseen, but were foreseen by me, predicted and warned against at the time, including personally, up close and personal, with Mr. Blair. Just me and him in corridors, in heated discussions, which almost became violent, in which I told them, in the case of Iraq, for example, there is no Al-Qaeda in Iraq. But if you invade Iraq, there will be tens of thousands of Al-Qaeda in Iraq. You can overthrow the regime in Baghdad, easily. But the fall of Baghdad will not be the beginning of the end, but only the end of the beginning. And millions will pay with their lives and their livelihoods. And Iraq will be broken and sectarianized. And that's exactly what has happened. I told them, if you invade Iraq, you will cascade fanatic, takfiri, Bin Laden-style extremism around the world. That's exactly what has happened. They claim that this was all unforeseen, but I know that it was not unforeseen because I'm the person who told them to their faces that this would happen. So that's an achievement of sorts. Unfortunately, Iraq is destroyed. Its people dispersed, millions of them around the world, 1 million dead, Abu Ghraib and all of that. That's a very high price to pay, even in the context of the subsequent vindication of our point of view. I like to think that I've played a role in making more British people understand the Muslim world more, understand where Muslims are coming from, why they feel so aggrieved, why some of them are so angry, and why some of them, a smaller number, but still a big number, are ready to kill themselves in order to kill others that they hold responsible for the grievances. I'm making a movie about Tony Blair, the killing of Tony Blair. It's not me killing Tony Blair, it's about Tony Blair's killing. I'm constantly in action. By the grace of God, I have a lot of energy, and I'm still doing it.
What motivates you? You're known for your courage and your fearlessness. What is the recipe for that particular success?
Well, first of all, I'm a religious believer. I'm not afraid, therefore, of anybody but God. I'm afraid only of the Judgment Day. It's the only election that counts for me. And I believe deeply, and always have, that this is a transitory life, that the other life is what counts, and that what you do in this life will determine your fate in the next. If you look at life that way, there is no need to be afraid. In any case, I grew up in very tough streets. There's nobody physically frightens me. I told when I went to the US Senate in 2005, gave them a bloody good hiding. I told the senator in charge just before the hearing when he tried to bully me, I said, Senator, don't make the mistake of imagining that I'm afraid of you. I'm afraid of no one but God. This got me off to a good start and got him off to a bad start. So that's the first thing. Because of my father and his father, I have never tasted alcohol in my life. And this is a major secret for me and differentiates me from many politicians here. Many of them most of them drink alcohol. Many of them drink alcohol to excess. And so they don't have the energy that I have got. I'm up very early in the morning, every day, with the same spring in my step that I had yesterday. And this I partly put down to the complete absence of alcohol from my life. And because I am driven by the tasks that remain unfinished and the injustices that remain festering. And I follow in many things, the rubric of the late and great Comandante Che Guevara, who said that the man who is not capable of trembling with indignation at any injustice visited anywhere on any person is not really a man. And I am. I tremble with indignation when I see and hear of injustice. And it moves me. And I have long believed that action speaks louder than words, that talking is cheap. Even tears are cheap. I'm feeling some now in my eyes. What counts is what you do, not what you say or even think. And as long as God gives me breath, I'll continue to do it. And Palestine will be the last word on my lips if I can arrange it.
Would you see the future of the Middle East and Palestine? What would you like to see happening there?
This poison of sectarianism, this insanity of sectarianism, where people eat each other's hearts, cut each other's heads off, murder each other over the issue of whether we fold our hands or keep them by our sides. As Khomeini said, while you're debating this, the others are planning to chop off your arms. He was right about that. The danger for the Arabs is if they go into this vortex of sectarian hatred, there will be no Arab world. There will not be 23 Arab countries. There will be 233, maybe 2,333 emirates, all facing each other, all divided on a sectarian confessional basis, all arming against each other. The Arabs will never realize their potential to be a superpower if they go into this vortex. And there's a real and present danger of going into that vortex. This is why I took the stand for Syria that I have. Not because I love Bashar, I don't. Not because I love the Ba'ath Party, I don't. Not because I think there's nothing wrong in Syria, I don't think there's nothing wrong. There's lots wrong. But if sectarianism triumphs in Syria and breaks it into confessional emirates, then the future for the Arab world will be bleak indeed. I have a different vision. From the Atlantic to the Gulf, from Marrakesh to Bahrain, 350 million Arabs speaking one language, worshipping one God, with a common culture, with of course regional differences. This should be a superpower in the world, not least because it has an ocean of oil and gas underneath its land and water. The Arabs should be amongst the most powerful of all the blocs in the world, but they will never achieve this if they go down this crossroads path to a sectarian future. I believe in the Arabs more than they believe in themselves. I believe that they can achieve great things, things that are worthy of the language and the religion which God gave them. And I hope that they will realize that future, and I hope that they will take a better path.
George Galloway, thank you very much for joining us.
It's been a pleasure.